Okay, thank you very much for taking the time to have a quick look at the video. So in the previous video I've looked at the less precise X-rail system that we offer, which is a pressed steel section. This is now moving up to the next stage where you're talking about quite high accuracies. So typically these rails will give you 0.15 of a millimetre accuracy over about 3 metres, and sort of heavier duty loads. The compact rail system we think is quite unique. There are about 4 or 5 different sizes. Here at Automotion we do try and stock pretty much all of this rail system, and we can cut it to whatever length you require and dispatch it the same day. If it's not in stock, typically it'll be a sort of a week and a half lead time, but we do try and keep most of it in stock. So moving on to the product, I think a lot of people, when they look at linear rails, start with linear guideways, and they're used to those products, and these newer products are not quite so prevalent, and people need to be aware of the advantage of them. So for me, the compact rail system has a couple of distinct advantages. First of all, when you come to install the system, the accuracy which you require the faces to which you're installing it do not need to be machined as accurately as for linear guideways. So for me, the big benefits of the compact rail system are that there are 2 types of rails. There's a master T-rail and a slave U-rail system. So for example, here we have a T-rail profile, and you'll see here that the bearing is completely enclosed within that rail. So what happens is, as it's running down the system, it's taking its accuracy straight from this T-rail, whereas the U-rail, which we have here, is more of a channel. And basically, as the carriage runs up and down the T-rail, the U-rail, the slider, can float in and out, taking account of the variations in the structure as it goes up and down the system. So the systems are mainly set up in this plane, so you have the radial loads being activated here, because the radial load is about twice the amount of the axial load. So typically you would have 2 carriages per rail, and you'd have a T-rail and a U-rail. So you can face it out that way, or you can face it that way, obviously horizontally and vertically. So you will also see, I don't know if you can see here, but the standard slider has a lot of sealing. You can see here it's got some wipers, so as it actually wipes, as it actually runs through the rail, it's clearing any debris out. It's very, very well protected by seals down the side here. It also has a little grease nipple, and basically what happens is that as you grease it, it goes onto these small pads here, and it lubricates the rail as required. The other big advantages, I think, of the compact rail system is that it's not based on small miniature recirculating bearings. Rather, it's based on 3 or more larger bearings which are retained within this slider. So for example here we've got the standard NT type slider, and you'll see there 3 bearings. Now the interesting thing about this is that one of these bearings, in this case the central bearing, is an eccentric bearing. So you can actually push that against the rail or back it off the rail to make it run more freely or more stiffly as required. The other thing is, on the front here, I don't know if you can see, but so this is the central bearing. Typically you will align it so the load obviously goes down on the 2 fixed bearings. You can actually see some little arrow marks here marking the fixed bearing, and so that will enable you to easily install the system. So it's quite easy to install. Just pop the sliders, just push in the little seals, pop the slider in the rail, and that's it. Up and down it goes. So what we have here are 3 or 4 different sizes of rail, which will cater for different loads that the customers might be requiring. So this is a size 18. So this is a standard slider which has got the protective ends. This is a special slider which has got more linear bearings in it, which can take heavier loads. So this is a size 18. Then the next size up we have, which is probably the most popular, which is a size 28. Again, you can have the standard slider or sliders with different variations of bearings, and in this case what we've got here is bearings with rubber protective seals. So these are 2RS seals. whereas for example on the standard slider you'll find that you've got two Z seals. Now this is quite important because if you actually get some moisture or damp, if this gets wet, it can actually damage the small ball bearings that are inside of that. So if you think you've got sort of an application where you get some moisture and some damp, then you need to consider the rubber seal bearings. So that's again, so what we've got there is the T-rail, and again here this will be the U-rail, and then we move up to the next size, which is the size 43 rail, which is again a very popular rail, quite heavy duty. Again here we've got the T-rail, and we have got the U-rail version of it. So on the U-rail version of it you can see that that bearing can move in and out as the master rail is driven along, and basically it is taking account of any distortions and preventing any stickiness as going down. It's also, as I say, making sure that the whole rail system is being kept clean and clear. Interestingly too, what we can do is we can provide special coatings on the rails. So at the moment these are zinc coated. We've got some nickel coating that can be provided, and also some very unusual special alloy protection which can enable them to be used outside. Now obviously if they're going to be used outside, you need to make sure that the correct bearings are supplied, the ones with the rubber seals, and that we have the stainless steel bearings to suit. So that's the most important thing on that. And then on the very large size, which is the size 63, now these are very, very heavy duty bearings. Again, you can see maybe a bit more clearly here about these arrows where these fixed bearings are, but this size 63 for heavier duty applications. And bear in mind that this rail, the unique thing about this is that you can join it together and it can run very, very accurately over long distances. So typically we will hold sections up to about 3.2 to 4 meters in stock here. If you want a longer run, what we can do is we can select the rails, make sure that they're matched, and we can join them together. So how we join them together, simply what we do is these holes are on an 80mm pitch. Normally we sell this in multiples of 80, so normally at each end there will be a 40mm hole pitch. We put an extra hole in here, 20mm from the end, and 20mm from the end of the other piece. Make sure that the ends are machined flat, and then we will use a special joining piece to join them in place, lock them down. That's then removed, and the whole system can run very, very smoothly. So in terms of alignment, the T and the U rail are very good for aligning things when they're out in this plane, but sometimes we can get applications where there might be some small differences in height in this plane too, and we also have something called a K rail, which is really a mixture of a T rail and a U rail. It's still retained, but it will allow some degree of twist and misalignment in this plane here. So that's quite important as well. So what you'll find here is that you've got 3 different types of sliders. What I call the standard NT sliders, which are normally 3 bearings, or it can be more, but again they'll be very well protected. So you can see the seals and the setup there. The older version sliders are more of a rubber, of a steel body, and this again can come in different types of configurations. But typically what you'll be able to see here is you can have multiple applications of the bearings. You've got different fixing holes compared to the standard sliders, and again this can give you a little bit more variation if you've got extra loads to carry. To give you some idea of the loads that each slider can carry, mainly in the radial direction, the size 18 slider, each one of these can take a load of up to 80 kilos, which is pretty impressive. On the size 28, each one of these can take 200 kilos. So typically what you'd have is 2 sliders for the T-rail, 2 sliders for the U-rail. So if you had that, that could take a load capacity of up to about 800 kilos. So that's heavy duty. When you then move up to the size 43, each one of these sliders can take half a ton. So if you've got 4 sliders and 2 rails, that's a load capacity of 2 tons. On the size 63, each one of these will give you about 1.25 tons, so 4 times 1.25, total load capacity, if you just had 4 sliders, of about 5 tons. just like to show you quickly about how to adjust the tension in a slider. So this is quite free running at the moment. So each one of these sliders is issued with a special key. And basically what happens is we just insert this underneath there, and there's a flat there, and basically we can just slacken that off, and then by using this we can move the eccentric bearing towards the rail or back off it. Once that's the right sort of tension that you're after, you can just simply tighten that up and fix it in place. The bearings have special threads in them which are anti-vibration threads, so they'll stay in place. If, however, there is a lot of vibration in the environment that you're using the rails in, we would recommend just to put some Loctite in place as well. Okay, thank you very much for your time. That is a brief overview of the compact rail system. I'd like to give you sort of a rough guide to the prices of the rail. So typically for 1 metre of the compact rail, the T or the U rail, they're both the same price. That'll be about, for a metre, about £130, and the sliders will be about £98. When you move up to the size 43, per metre it's about £160, and the sliders are about £114. But the big benefits of the system are that you do not have to machine your structure as accurate as you would if you had another type of, like for example, a monorail system, a recirculating ball system, because you're using the master rail and the slave rail to take account of any inaccuracies and to avoid that stiction when you sort of move things over a reasonable distance. So thank you very much again.